This Rewired. I'm Jeff Cook.
I'm Katie Whitlock.
Katie, we're going to jump into this book.
Yay!
Last time we set up When Working Together Doesn't Work by Joey Stabile. The intro is exhaustive. If you got through 2 hours and are ready for more, you're a champion Enneagram student. You get special prizes.
A gold star.
Gold stars and stickers from us for diving in to the introduction to Processing Center. What we wanted to do was to go through just some of the vocabulary only on Processing Center from Shuey's book. There is a ton in this book, so we are skimming the depths to be plumbed here, but did want to, because this is the first time that we're getting a chance to really wrestle with Shuey's thoughts on Processing Center, wanted to just highlight some of the specific thoughts. And today we're going to hit 8s, 3s, and 1s. These are those who, in Shuey's language, process with doing. And lots of great stuff to talk about. So anything worth saying before we jump in?
There is probably one more idea we should set up before we jump into this, which is Joey's idea of support centers. Joey's language is that the center at the end of your stress line is not a stress move, but it's the center that supports your dominant center, right? So Let's look at 8s. 8s start in doing. They're doing processors. Their stress line goes into 5, into thinking. So Joey's language is that 8s are doing supported by thinking. And in more Joey language, that means they're doing supported by logic and objectivity and whatever, all the words she uses. 1s, on the other hand, are doing, and then they're connected to 4. So they're doing supported by feeling, which in her language is subjectivity. And the difference in those two things, having the same processing center but being supported by different centers, by thinking versus feeling, gives rise to a lot of differences in her view between 8 and 1s. And then 3s, we're actually kind of already in what would have been our support center, right? Because we started in feeling. And then our stress line is up into 9, into doing, but we're already there. We're already processing and doing. So Joey's language is that 3s stay too long in doing. We use it to process and we use it to support. So that also gives rise to differences as we go through. So you might hear us, I wanted to set up that language because you might hear us talk about supported by thinking or supported by feeling and the difference in those two things. So a very quick setup of that idea.
I think that's very well said.
Do you like my industrial grade water bottle?
I am always impressed by how much water you consume.
This is a 96 ounce water bottle.
Come on. You're going to get nothing but support and admiration from me on these fronts. So, all right, well, 8s, 3s, and 1s. I'm going to start with the 8s, her chapter on 8s, which is a fantastic chapter, not only to get into the perspective of 8s, but this is very much an autobiographical chapter I found compared to everything else. When speaking about 8s, there is a lot of personal language here, which I think is a choice. I think it's a worthy choice, especially because it's the first chapter in the book. And so she's introducing herself to her audience by saying, here's my type and how it's expressed. So my quick take is that a lot of her language about 8s is very much colored by her own experience, for good and for bad. But lots of great things to say here about 8ness. You want to say anything before we jump into some quotes?
Yeah, we were talking about this offline, but I think if you don't know 8s, you're going to read this chapter and be like, oh, that was good. You know, I can, like Jeff said, I can hear Joey's voice in this. And I want everyone, if you buy this book, which you should, and you read the chapter on 8s, I want you to really get in the mindset of an 8 and realize how vulnerable Joey is being in this chapter and how good that makes the chapter. Because we so rarely get to see inside the mind of an 8 like Joey has set up in this chapter. And that, I think, is inherently very vulnerable feeling for 8s. So one, I commend her because that's like the hardest thing to do for an 8 anyways. And 2, that makes it so that I think this is one of the best places to read about an 8 now, right? Like if someone comes to me and they want to read about 8s, I'm going to show them this chapter. One, because anything written by somebody who's that number is usually pretty good. But 2, that like Joey was brave enough to be super vulnerable about what's really going on and like how it hurts her when people react to her in certain ways, which we don't get to hear from 8s very often. So anyway, those were my thoughts going through it. I was very grateful for her for like how much she opens up in this chapter about what it's like to experience the rest of the world kind of coming at you as an 8, because we always think that 8s are coming at us. And the whole kind of point of this chapter is that 8s kind of experience the rest of the world coming at them, which is so 8. Like, that's the whole thing.
It's well said.
Right? Like, 8s do feel very vulnerable. So they just cover it up so they don't seem vulnerable. But
I think there's a principle to highlight here, just Enneagram-wise. There is something about getting around 4s, 5s, and 9s who get into their body. When 4s, 5s, and 9s elevate their repressed center and really get into action, they bring something to the world that's untouchable. It's very, very unique and interesting, and it does things that very few of us can do. When 1s, 2s, and 6s get into their thinking, it really is a treasure to the rest of us. But it takes them doing that. And the same is true for 3s, 7s, and 8s. And this is a great example of that. She is getting into some of her emotions here in this chapter. It really is a benefit to the rest of us. So well done. I think that you're exactly right to say vulnerability is difficult. Notice how vulnerable this comes out. What a treasure.
Yeah.
I'm going to start I got 5 quotes from each of the chapters and we're just highlighting the ones that kind of tease processing center. The 3 and 1 chapter are much more philosophical and much more idea oriented, but this 8 chapter has a lot of personal language. So we'll have to kind of pull back the curtain to say, how is this about processing center? But she starts out the chapter. There was a distinct pattern to my professional reviews for the first 20 years of my career, regardless of the industry or my specific role in the organization. The message was the same. Joey, we cannot do what we do at such a high level without you, and you have to get along better with other people. Thoughts?
I think, well, the next line is my thought. She goes, in other words, my doing was unparalleled, my thinking was innovative, but my feeling had to improve. That sets up her entire idea of how every single Enneagram number works, right? The doing was unparalleled. She's a doing processor. Her thinking was innovative. Her thinking is what supported her doing, and she's feeling repressed. And you could say that about, and then she goes and talks about that with every single number in this book. So first of all, I think that's a great intro.
True.
But my thoughts are, she points out the fact that 8, 3s, and 1s are motors really well here. When they say, Joey, we cannot do what we do at such a high level without you. I think that points to, like, at the end of the day, 8, 3s, and 1s want to get something done. So they're not going to get bogged down in all these, like, and 1s also might be a little different here, especially 8s and 3s, like these little details, like whatever, right? Well, also, she does say that 8s are good at details as well, but maybe that's just my 3 brain. But I hear the motor is my thought here. I hear the motor, right? We cannot do what we do without you. You are the person doing. And we're mad at you because we feel like you don't like us, which is the whole story of an 8. But
agreed. There's something about just 3 centers. The 3 centers are right up front: feeling, thinking, doing, head, heart, gut. The idea that she is preferring one of these and quote unquote processing through one of these at cost to the other centers is outlined here. And this is the dominant idea that she has about processing center for the most part, is that, when you pivot to process with one of the centers, in some ways you're going to leave those other centers behind, because what you are aiming at, and this is, again, my view of processing center, is you are doing assessment. Am I good in the world? And if being good in the world means execution for 8s, 3s, and 1s, that's what's first. And sometimes that means that other people's feelings are secondary. Well, actually, it would be by definition, other people's feelings are secondary.
Yeah, absolutely. For 8s, at least, for sure. You have to drop, to be so good at something, you have to drop something else. And 8s have, not chosen because they're hardwired to do this, but the personality of 8 is hardwired to drop feeling, right? So I'm going to do what I need to do to make this bigger and better. You can either get on board or I'll leave you behind. Because
exactly right.
That's all you can do. If you want to make things bigger and better, you can't spend the time to bring everybody with you, right? Then you're not going to get to bigger and better as fast as you want to be able to as an 8. So you have to leave people behind.
Either that or you have to challenge them despite their preferences.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to be strong. We're going to win. You're going to keep up. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like running today. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Get up. Put your shoes on.
Yeah.
We're going.
Yeah.
This is what we are doing. You're part of the team, and this is what we're doing because the goal is the execution. I do think, and I don't know that she talks about security much, but I would love to highlight that. Notice how security works here. Once you get what you're aiming for, once the 1, 3, and 8 actually execute, it allows them to move into their secure number. And it'd be well worth talking about that as well. But I think once 8s get what they want, execution-wise, it will actually open up a door for their heart. They can get into 2 space a little bit more. But until they execute, it will be, your primary motive still needs to get fulfilled.
Yeah.
Triads, baby. That's a second quote for me was a little further in. She says, and this sets up the 1s, 3s, and 8s, actually. This is a longer quote, but she says, the 2 elements that fail to meet an 8's expectations, this is page 51, by the way. The 2 elements that fail to meet an 8's expectation with the most regularity are attention to detail and scope of impact. You just brought this up. When you consider the doing processors, while 8s share the most similarities with 3s, attention to detail is one of the few areas where 8s and 1s align. For 8s, this is a key benefit to being the only type for whom doing is supported by thinking. You brought this up. 8s fit attention of detail into our natural swift execution, whereas 1s can get bogged down by it, slowing productivity and leading them to micromanage. 3s tend to bypass attention and detail, cutting corners in their drive to be efficient. This consistently proves to be the number one stressor for 1s who work with or manage 3s. Over time, 1s can become extremely resentful of cavalier 3s who receive applause for completing tasks by cutting corners while speeding through doing. Not so with 8s. We do plenty to irritate 1s, but sacrificing detail for speed is not on that list.
First of all,
but you're gonna elbow the 3 out of the way.
I think one of the funniest things about this book. Okay, no one's brought up that this book is kind of like Joey's funny. I don't think she wrote this to be fair. To be funny. I'm not saying that was like her inserting a joke, but I say funny because I really do think it's like, this is not negative, but like when you read through this book every so often, some number that's not the point of the chapter will like get a drive-by hit. You're like, right, wait, what are we talking about?
That person just shot me. It's a drive-by hit. This is exactly what happens.
I remember reading this and I was like, aren't we supposed to be talking about 8s right now? What? But here's the thing.
Why are you digging on me?
That's true. That's so true. I absolutely cut corners and I absolutely don't pay attention to details. Mm-hmm. And I just assume that everyone else is also doing that. So it was very good for me to read that. That's why I'm saying I don't think Joey wrote that to like be funny. Like I think that's really true. But I remember being like, what are we talking about right now? I just got shot.
She'll say something later about how she speaks in superlatives, and this would be one of them. The idea that this consistently proves to be the number one stressor for 1s. Friends, I'm married to a 3. Friends, my podcast partner is a 3. I love working with 3s. There is a complementariness in my experience to working with 3s. Some 1s might not be very mature and not know how to handle the speed and priorities of 3s, and perhaps have not engaged their mouth and talked about what they want with 3s and received reciprocal communication from the 3s. I think she is describing some unhealthy people in the work environment.
Certainly.
And there is lots of unhealthy people in the work environment.
Yeah.
But
that
was my take.
I think if you're reading this and hearing that means that every single one is upset with every single 3, then I think you're reading it wrong, right? Maybe this is...
I read everything as judgment on me, Katie.
I guess so. Like, I think This consistently proves to be the number one stressor for ones who work with or manage threes. Do you not think it's true that if you did feel like I was super cavalier with details and didn't care and was just going forward and wasn't letting you know and wanted to put a positive spin on everything but wasn't actually doing anything, don't you think you'd get upset with me?
One of the best things for my heart and work is that threes don't let me sit in this quagmire.
Yeah, but that's because you're healthy.
Details.
If you were an unhealthy one, wouldn't that upset you?
If I was an unhealthy person with a broken leg, it would upset me that my leg was hurting all the time when I tried to walk.
If you didn't know you were a one and you didn't know that you were a person built to chase perfection, you just thought that that's what everybody should be doing, would it not upset you if I came along and started cutting all these corners and then getting the awards for it anyway?
At times, so it again is levels of health and how you process that. Yeah. I think it would engage, what I hear there is it would engage maybe my envy side if I was finding my value in awards.
No resentment.
I think resentment's misunderstood sometimes, and maybe it's the case that my resentment, I need to do more work here. I'll tell you where cutting corners has affected me in my house. It's with painting the walls without tape and getting splatters on the floor. That is, you're going too quick. But she is the one doing the work also. So there's kind of a balance there of like, I really would like this to be done a little bit more, quote unquote, professionally, but also, you know what? I'm thrilled that this is getting done. That would be an example of efficiency over perfection in our home.
I think another thing that it's important to keep in mind when reading Joey's book is everything she says applies to life as well, but she wrote it for work. She wrote it to take this to like your corporate office or like your nonprofit, right? And I imagine, I've not heard her say this, but I imagine the majority of people she's consulting with or for or whatever, they don't know the Enneagram, right? And they're, especially when we're talking about 8 3s and 1s, the broken parts of their personality is what got them to where they are, right? So they're going to have to be convinced a little bit that this is actually a con about you instead of a pro, right? So I'm sure Joey is talking to ones who are in that kind of unhealthy, of course we all need to do it this way, right? I've done it this way my entire career and look where I am. Of course she's talking to 3s who don't see anything wrong with cutting a corner. So of course she sees a lot of 1s and 3s getting upset with each other.
You and I jumped right into the 1s and 3s.
I know. We didn't even talk about the 8s. Okay.
I mean, when you get hit by a drive-by,
I did.
To throw back, you need to at least raise your fist and shake.
I laughed out loud when I read that. I was like, what is going on?
What do you see here about the 8s? The 8s and doing processing?
I think what I saw here, I didn't know. This is going to be so silly to say out loud. I didn't know that 8s had that good of an attention to detail, because I just assume I'm so similar to 8s in all ways except for like feeling. And I just assumed part of being in the independent stance was just rushing forward without having a plan and without paying attention to the details. I just figured that was part of being in the independent stance. But if what Joey is saying is true, that's very clearly not a part of the independent stance. And the biggest thing to me that I was struck with when I read that quote was how much energy that would take to move that fast and to have all the details planned out. My God. So like that would take so much energy from me to move as fast as I do and also be thinking about every single thing that I do. That's what really struck me was when she says 8s have the most energy. I always was like, yeah, right. No, I get it. But that made me really get it. How much attention you would have to pay to everything to be able to move that fast and that detailed and like be mostly correct. Even if you come across as like steamrolly, right? To be like technically right in most things.
What I hear there actually is that eights, and this has been my experience of eights just have a very high perception of their intuitions about specific things. It's not actually about all things. So when I see eights get specific to details, it's a lot like ones. They have a limited scope of what really, really matters, but they're very fast at pointing it out. So I've many of us have been confronted by eights about certain things, and it's like, are you stupid? Why are you doing this thing? They have a sphere of that they really care about, and it comes out as an aggressive posture about, you need to care about the things that matter most. That's what matters most is unfortunately subjective. Pause. And
sure. No, I would agree with that.
But it does come into play here. I think that I think she's right that both ones and eights, it's because of the body center, I think, end up having strong preferences for details, because details oftentimes on these fronts are very spatial in nature. And I bet you it's the case that it's the spatial side that will be emphasized most by these types.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. What does that mean? What's a spatial detail? Like what? Versus a non-spatial detail.
I get in my car with an 8. The 8 looks around and says, "So are you going to pick up the trash in here?" I was in a room once where a guy was sharing a story and just started crying. He had a microphone. It's a room of 40 people. Nobody knew what to do, as it were, or were not as quick to process the situation. And 8 in the back stood up and said, "Don't just sit there," and walk to the front and hug the man.
That's sweet.
And they're that very relational on that front, but it's also very spatial. It's understanding the temperature of the room and meeting it with one's power. Lots to say there, I think. What do you think?
Do you think that 8s believe that the ends justify the means, or no?
Yes.
Really?
My way. I think that my way is a dominant mindset for 8s, which I would love to have seen more in her language. But right way is a very one-ish. And it might be the case that as a 1, I'm vastly more aware of the means than probably any other type. So it's probably the case that I'm on an extreme edge when judging whether or not other people care about the means.
I think you answered a different question.
Okay.
So when I guess maybe I'm asking the question in a different way. When I say, do you think the ends justify the means? I'm asking, do you think 8s care about how something gets done as well as getting it done?
Yeah.
Because I have a no after I read all 3 of these chapters, which I want to bring up now. Maybe we can come back to it. But I said 8s and 1s take in through doing, and they use doing to process, which means that what I got from her chapters is how things happen is very important to both 8s and 1s. 3s, the only reason I'm doing processing is to go back to the relationships and to make sure that my relationships are okay. So I don't really care how things happen as long as the end result is that people like me, right? Yep. Because I'm not using doing processing for the same reason that you and an 8 would be using doing processing. So in that sense, like, I feel like 3s are the definition of the ends justify the means. Like, it really doesn't matter how it works. I just want it to turn out in the way that where it looks like what I wanted it to be, right? I don't have a plan of how we're going to get there. I feel like I do, but that's something I'm realizing about myself, is I really kind of don't have a plan about how we're going to get there. I just want it to look this certain way at the end.
I would stick with my answer. The justice orientedness of 8s, 9s, and 1s primary. We want things to be right in the world. Justice is about everything in the world being a certain way. 8s, I think, are much more inclined to push hard against all obstacles in order to get to that end. And that pushing, maybe we trample people in the process. That's not always like, granted, healthy people don't do this, we might say. But I bet you she would be inclined to say, yes, if there's ways to move people out of the way without trampling them, but you're still moving people out of the way because you got a target. Whereas the ones, we'll see it in one chapter, are going to be how we get to that justice matters as much as the justice we arrive at. That would be the difference, I think, between those two types.
So are you saying that 8s think that the ends justify the means? Is that what you're saying? 8s don't care how we get there as long as we get there?
Let's talk about the means for a second.
Because can I say something? I think that because you're a 1, you're saying that the means have to be kind. And an 8 might not agree with that.
Agreed.
Right?
Yep.
But I absolutely think an 8 cares about how they get somewhere. It's going to be the 8's own definition of justice, right? And what's fair. And that certainly might not line up with a 1's definition of what's right and fair. But an 8 I think, will hold themselves to their own standards of, I'm going to get here in a certain way. I'm not going to throw other people under the bus, right? I'm not going to be unfair in the way I get somewhere. I'm going to earn it myself. I'm going to blah, 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 all the things, right? So I do think that's very important to an 8. I just think a 1 looks at how they do that and they think that it's wrong, like morally sometimes.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering if that's what's really happening. It's you just reading that they don't care about how you would define what's right and what's fair. And so that means that they don't care about what's right and what's fair, which is maybe not actually true. It's just that they have a different definition. Did that make sense?
It totally did. I'm trying to think of it. Is it the case that 8s can use immoral tactics to get the ends that they think best for everybody, and then through those ends look back and say, look, I realized that I had to trample some folks, but notice we arrived at a place that produced more peace, more harmony, more justice on the way?
I don't think that sounds like a 6 to me.
Oh?
I don't think that an 8 would be immoral because they're not judging themselves against any standard except their own. So an 8, I don't think an 8 is going to do something that they feel like is wrong.
That might be it. So let's go down that road. Ends justifying the means. If the means for the 8 is something like this, I'm willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. That means if you're on the team and I've been here longer than you and you know what you signed up for, this is how we do things here. That would be a posture of how the means are going to get executed.
Yeah.
So when I imagine there are many who might look at that sort of way of doing things as you are trampling people.
Sure, and you might be trampling people, but that's not going to factor into an 8's definition of what's just and fair, right?
True. Okay, so you think...
I don't think 8s know they're doing that. I think if an 8 knew that they were actively running over people... Like, she has so much in this chapter about how she does not realize that she does that to people, right? So it's not fair, I think, to judge an 8 on how many people they run over if they didn't know they were doing that, right? Because if they knew they were doing it, then maybe we could judge them on whether they think that's right and fair, right?
Okay.
If an 8...
I mean, I know plenty of 8s who know that they are getting up in your ass, and that's because we need to do the thing.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. There is something about 8s, 9s, and 1s, I think, where there is I'm not controlling you. But if you signed up for the thing, that's your choice. Yeah. And this is how we're doing it. Because I was here first, or I'm the leader, or whatever. And that means you are now on board my ship, and we are going to execute.
I think, I want to bring up a quote that I noticed in this chapter, and then I'm going to use it to answer what you just said.
Please.
Joey has this quote, I don't remember what page it is, where she talks about, she kind of explains why people get upset at 8s. Mm-hmm. And so she sets up this situation where an 8 has a manager at work, and the 8 wants to do something big. And the manager says, you're not going to be able to do that in that timeline. You're not going to be able to get that done. And then she says, and the 8 goes, oh, really? and they square up against the timeline and they defeat the timeline. And then they come back to the manager and they say, look, I did it. And the manager, in Joey's language, for some reason, has taken that personally. And they felt like the 8 squared up against them when the manager wasn't even a thought in that 8's mind. All the 8 did was defeat the timeline. So why would you feel like I'm upset at you, right? I want to bring that to what you just said. I totally agree with I've heard 8 say stuff like this, like, you're on the team, you agreed to be here, we're going at 500 miles per hour. If you can't keep up, that is your problem. The one thing I would change is that you said it's because I'm the captain or I'm the leader. I don't think 8s are thinking about that. I don't think 8s think about themselves. I don't think 8s think about people. I think they think about, this ship goes 500 miles per hour. And if you want to be here, you have to go 500 miles per hour because we are all going at this speed. There just seemed a little too much like personhood in what you said. And what I got from this chapter about 8s is that 8s don't think about themselves, right? They're squaring up against whatever needs to get done. They're not like lording the fact that they're the captain over your head, right? And I've decided we're going 500 miles per hour, so that's what we're doing.
Two things. Perhaps it's worth talking about this for a minute in terms of this book. She does a great job of not engaging the shadow side of these types. And I think I wrote a book on the deadly sins. I'm obsessed with this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to broken humanity, that's my wheelhouse. and it may be the case that doesn't sell when you're talking to Chick-fil-A. So
True.
When talking about 8s in the workplace, giving them, it may be the case that we just say, look, we're talking about people who are self-actualized, have some self-understanding, and are doing their best to be part of the team.
Yeah.
And I can see that. I would want to, on top of what you were saying, just highlight what she highlights in that first paragraph, that 8s are feeling repressed. And so it's not just your feelings, it's their feelings, that these are irrelevant to us getting the job done. Means wise, and you're going to see this in the 1 chapter, means wise, I think that's a huge mistake. People's feelings matter in process. 8s can shift into that gear of your feelings don't matter. This is where we're going.
Sure. How does that debate anything I said?
So do the ends justify the means if the means are dismissing emotions?
To you, of course not.
Correct. So, and to the 8, they would say, of course, arriving at execution matters more than pausing to consider all of your emotions in the process.
That's a different argument, I think.
Well, it's part of the means. I mean, not for the 4s.
Your means. That's my point. They're part of your means as a 1. We can all have completely separate means of, these are the things you should think about when you're getting someplace. Because you're a 1, of course you are going to judge other people, rightfully so, right? Absolutely, it's the shadow side of an 8 that they don't think about other people. Of course you are going to think, if you aren't thinking about other people, you're doing the wrong thing. Of course. My point is that 8s are judging themselves on a completely different set of rules. And according to their set of rules, they do care about how they get somewhere. It's just that the rest of us look at their set of rules and we say your rules are wrong because they don't think about other people.
Is there a line there? I mean, I think we're having it both ways in terms of, like, if I say these are my rules, I'm going to, it could justify all sorts of horrible things. But these are my rules for getting where I want to go.
Yeah.
I
guess I'm not saying this and then the conclusion is like 8s are like never do anything wrong. Like, I don't want people to be drawing that conclusion from what I'm saying.
They care about the means, but they have their definition. They have their definition.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Because the original question was, do you think 8s think that the ends justify the means?
I get you.
I think that they do. It's just that their definition of the means is going to be so different from so many other people's, right?
Perfect.
Whereas 3s don't. Go ahead.
Let me grant this because it's going to help me win a different debate about subjectivity and objectivity later.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Quote number 3.
Okay, perfect. That was, what are we even talking about?
Well, I think you're being defensive, rightly so, for the fact that 8s, when they come to the job, are coming and saying, look, I'm doing the job. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm not trying to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
You are taking it a certain way, but like, I signed up for this job and we're going to do the job.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. And if you're on board, look, we're outlining how we're going to do this. I, by the way, really resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, I imagine you do. Yeah.
In my business and in work that I've done in the past in nonprofit world, every single conversation I had with our board was about, these are the goals and this is in writing. And when you came on board, this was on paper as our bylaws.
Right.
And it was just always back to the bylaws.
Yeah.
So now notice the systems and right and wrong and all the things. But I can see how 8s would be very similar on that front, you know?
And I think, again, to say, like, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't criticize 8s. Absolutely we should criticize 8s. Just like we should absolutely criticize every other number, right? Or every number for their shadow side. And it's funny, I don't feel super defensive, although I guess I am being super defensive. I just think it's really, really important to criticize a number for what's actually going on. And so many people criticize 8s for things that didn't actually happen, right? People criticize 8s for coming after them and like wanting to destroy them and doing that. Yeah. And my point is, you should absolutely criticize an 8 for their ability to burn down a room and not even know they did it, right? For their assumption that all of us only want to do things instead of feel things, right? Like, sure, we can criticize an 8 for their shadow as long as we're talking about the actual shadow of an 8, right?
Yeah.
I guess I do feel very strongly about that. I do. Yeah.
Let me elevate what I think your heart is, and I think it's shared by Joey. The reason for writing the book in part is to expose Enneagram type and give you empathy for the perspective of people that you work with who are very, very different from you.
Right.
Like there's very much I think I'm jumping into encouraging people to be their healthiest self, and sometimes your type gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
It's not her project. Her project is let's understand how these types work so that we can be in a work environment and in a way that's better. And here's what you need to know about 8s. Yeah. All right. Round 4. Speaking of fights,
ding, ding.
Quote number 3. I used to genuinely struggle when my mom would teach that 8s love to pick a fight. That never hit home for me intuitively. I resonate a great deal with conflict being energizing, but starting conflict for the sake of conflict never settled well. I thought that was very helpful in terms of what's doing processing actually about. Is it about fighting or is it about something else? I think that this is a good clarifier. Do you hear anything there?
I heard, actually, this is a great quote to come after what we just talked about. I hear a real blind spot in 8s there, right? So speaking of what can we criticize 8s for, certainly, right? What I hear is that Joey didn't think she was fighting because she didn't think she was fighting, right? Like, she would get in a conflict with somebody and she would leave and wouldn't label it as a conflict, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think that's a big blind spot of 8s. I have heard from a lot of 8s, like, everybody talks to me about conflict and anger, and like, I don't feel like I'm like that angry or that much of a conflict seeker or whatever, right? Well, again, I don't think 8s are conflict seekers, but again, it's because the things that you do that everybody else is labeling as conflict, you're just not labeling as conflict, right? So certainly I do think that is a blind spot of 8s, like the anger and how it comes out. And I do agree with you. The doing processing is like 8s feel good because they got something accomplished, right? Doing processors are going to feel good when they get something accomplished. And the 8 got something accomplished through engaging in that conflict. And that's what they're judging. Am I okay on, right? We got something done, so we're good. And the other person has no eyebrows left on their face because they got singed off.
The eyebrow singeing, this would be... What I hear here is when my mom would teach 8s, she is hearing the message of somebody who is not a doing processor. And so it looks like a fight because her mom's a 2. And her 2-ness wants, her processing center is her feeling center. And so she wants to connect. And so, of course, some of the things coming out of the 8's mouth may feel like it goes against connection.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so it looks like you are picking a fight with folks when no, this isn't how happiness is found.
Yeah.
Little one.
Yeah.
Happiness is found in connecting with other human beings.
Yeah.
And she's like, well,
is it? Yeah.
Execution. It's also the case what I hear here is, starting a conflict for the sake of conflict never settled well. The idea that 8s don't need to be in control, but they don't want to be controlled is what I hear there. It's, when do you fight? Well, I'm not looking to pick a fight. That's a waste of energy. But I do pick fights. And perhaps it's worth naming when will the 8 pick a fight? I bet you their target is going to be something like their doing center. Right. What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And I wonder if it feels like picking a fight or just, okay, now I'm going to get into it and I'm going to do the thing, Joey has a good line about, she says it in the book somewhere. She says 5s and then she says another number, 6s. She says 5s and 6s. 5s and 6s are actually the ones who love debate, and people get confused between conflict and debate. So like sometimes she says she'll talk to people who think they're 8s and they're like, oh, I love conflict. And then she talks to them more and she figures out what you really like is debate. Right. And that's not very 8.
Yep.
Because her point is like an 8 has to slow down to debate with you. And an 8 is like, I do not care about your opinion. I'm going to do the thing anyway. Right. So if someone is like slowing down enough to debate you on something, they're probably not an 8, which again is, maybe another blind spot of an 8, something to criticize them for. But I thought that's interesting too. Like she didn't connect to, I don't seek out conflict. Why is everybody saying that? Right. Whereas 5s and 6s sometimes absolutely do seek out debate because it's intellectually stimulating for a 5. Right. And for 6 and 6, it lets them get all the information out on the table. What do we all think? I forget why I started that story, but that's what
I think that's right. Where I see what I see with my kid is when discussions come up and debate comes up, especially in places where they've thought through things, they just have cutting conclusions. They're not asking questions. They have cutting conclusions. And if you push back against their conclusions, they already have. This is how I feel about this whole book. She has the high ground. And every time that I kind of come at it, I'm like, holy crap, she's already entrenched in this spot. I need to do better thinking about how to come to some of these ideas. And that's how arguing with my kid feels. It's like they do a great job of, it's not about the intellectual propositions. They come already having produced decisive conclusions that they're probably not going to get moved off of.
That's what it feels like to
not
argue
so
with
6s.
Joey. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never feel like I argue
5s.
with Joey. I never even feel like I debate Joey because
Yeah.
I can't change her mind. And part of like a real debate is the idea that you might change the other person's mind with what you say. And so when I talk to Joey about like, oh, you said this, but what about this other thing? It always ends with me being like, oh yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't think about that. And it's because she's a fast processor. Like, she did already think about that, right? She's like, I'll prove it to you if you need me to prove it to you, but like, I'm not going to debate you on it.
That may be, like, just to highlight something in the book, she doesn't spend a lot of time defining her terms in this book sometimes. I think it's because of that. It's like, look, this is how I think about the things. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, I've already decided that this is what this means.
Yeah.
So
I'm inviting you to catch up at some level. Can be some of the claims made. I found that even, like, I'm fairly informed about Enneagram. I found that I had to reread a couple of times to go, okay, where are you going?
Right.
But that would be an example of that, I think. Anyway, quote 4. People are confused when they hear that 8s are not angry. This is page 55. We express our anger as intensely as we feel it, and then we move on. We don't stay angry once the issue is addressed. What we miss altogether is the staying power of our delivery. I think that's a stellar personal observation.
Yeah.
And something she's owning. It's also pushing much more into kind of a feeling space. I need to care about the emotions of people in front of me. I don't know if that has anything to do with processing center now that I say it, but it is a good quote.
I think part of being a doing processor is that you are not a feeling processor and you are not a thinking processor, right? You're a doing processor. And what I read in that is the absence of feeling processing, right? I am not even thinking about if the relationship is okay, right? That does not even factor in to, do I feel like I've done what I needed to do, right? Do I feel like things are okay now? The thinking doesn't show up as much here, I think, but maybe the like intense part of what she's talking about, you know, because when I think about thinking processing, I think about slowing down and stepping back and kind of looking at something from all the angles and doing things like that. Yeah. So what I think this is a good example of is showing what doing processing is not, right? By highlighting the absence of the feeling processing and the absence of the thinking processing. It's just, I had this feeling and I expressed it and I did what I wanted to do and now I'm moving on, right?
There's an undercurrent here that's like something made her angry. And I bet you it would, if you were to ask 8s, 9s, and 1s, like, what is it that makes you angry? It's probably something having to do with, well, I mean, I would want to say it's people pushing against their will.
Sure.
So, but for 8s and 1s, for 8s and 1s, it's going to be, this is what I'm seeking to accomplish. You're getting in the way. And so the anger is actually the result of the doings processing getting thwarted.
Yeah. Or she saw something unfair, you know? I hear 8s talk about that a lot. That makes me angry, right?
That would be an example, I think, of like the spatial side of 8s and what are you seeking to accomplish? You see something unfair that's not just. Notice there's that target for the body center. We want things to be just. Last quote for me on 8s. This is page 56. From a logical perspective, 8s are the only type on the Enneagram who have no self-focus. I've spent a lifetime reminding others often after discovering that my behavior has been discussed at length by others that not focusing on them in no way meant that I was focusing on myself. I now have language for that. My focus naturally shifts from task to task before shifting to others. I think that's a great, again, unveiling of what doing processing looks like, especially for those who don't process with doing.
I don't think that's related to doing processing because I have a self-focus as a 3 and I'm a doing processor. So I think
about that. Yeah, well, go ahead. I think what you're saying is interesting.
So 2, 6, and 9 represent a focus on others. 1, 8, and 5, I hope I'm doing these numbers right, represent a focus on task.
Okay.
And the other ones, 3, 4, and 7, represent a focus on self, which she makes a point to say is not like inherently selfish. It's, I mean, like sort of, but it's just like, I know what I want from my environment and I want to get it. Right.
I see where you're going.
But anyway, so it's very easy to be a doing processor and have a focus on self. It's just that everything you're doing is going to be fulfilling that focus on self versus the focus on task that 8s and 1s kind of have.
That's fair. That's why I think that's well said.
I do think it's interesting that you picked that up as a well, I think it like is evidence for her theory, because you are task and then supported by self, but you have that focus on task. So you saw that and you were like, oh yeah, that's doing processing, right? You are going to share that with 1s. Is doing processing is first and foremost going to be focused on completing the task. And my doing processing is going to be focused on getting what I want.
And both of them are doing processing.
And both of them are doing processing.
And this will be what it's going to be a good transition to 3s. Just because 8s, 3s, and 1s all process with doing doesn't mean that the target that they're seeking to accomplish is the same. Mm-hmm. And even how, I suppose we've already talked about this, but even how the means and ends are characterized by your motive.
Right.
These really matter.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Last word on 8s?
What's my last word on 8s? Not to be an 8 defender again, but
I like when you defend.
I think that what's unique about 8s is because of their way of being in the world, which is loud and brash and big, people don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think people do that like on purpose or to be mean or I think it just happens because of human nature. And I think a lot of other numbers get the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think people give 8s the benefit of the doubt. And what I mean by that is like people just want to assume that 8s are trying to hurt them, or that 8s are steamrolling them on purpose, or that somehow, somewhere in their brain, that 8 is thinking about me, right?
Yeah.
Because almost every number does have that, right? Like has something somewhere that does have this focus on self. And 8s just don't. They just don't. There's a lot to be angry at 8s about, sure, just like there's a lot to be angry at every number about. But I'm just going to say it again, I think it's really, really important to understand what's actually going on in an 8 before you get angry, to make sure that you're getting angry about the right things. Right? I don't want people to hear me and say, I think Joey can do no wrong. I think 8s can do no wrong. Certainly they can do wrong. But it's just so often it's not the wrong that people think they're doing.
Thing that strikes me reading her chapter most is that I think that we miss, and I've said this a handful of times, but I think we miss the kaleidoscopic presentation of 8s. I have an uncle that's an 8, a child that's an 8. My primary business partner is an 8. Just love working with 8s and have had lots of relationships. These are all very different people. I think that her expression of 8ness in this chapter is really showcasing that vibrant corporate personality of 8s. Some of the stuff that I would want to see more of, or would love to not neglect, is that 8s can also come across as very self-possessed and standoffish.
Sure.
And there's that same energy, but it's kind of, there can be the energy of don't come around me right now. Or this is my crew and we don't need you. That, can kind of come across. I think that may get lost here slightly. But as I think this is worth saying, I believe that 2s, 5s, and 8s have the smallest circle of trust. I think that needs to be paired here, because sometimes you're not in the circle. And I think a lot of her language about 8ness can come across for either those who, like, here's how I treat the people who are in the circle, and here's how I treat the people who aren't in the circle. And that, I think that matters in terms of how the doing processing works.
Yeah.
So, but worthwhile stuff.
I think, like we said, she didn't do a lot of shadow work in this book, which again, probably because it doesn't belong in the book, right? Like this is not a book for the shadow work. This is a book to take to your coworkers. And like you said, you can't talk about that when you're just like at work, right? But that does mean that
do you see that?
Misses some of the.
Do you see that as shadow? Being standoffish, being a little bit more self-protective.
Well, what I was really thinking when you were saying that is just like, I just don't think the 8's thinking about. I don't think they're like thinking about standing apart from you. You know what I mean?
Correct.
They're just doing their own thing. And the rest of us read that as standoffish. Which, again, I also want to be clear, like...
No, this is an excellent point.
It's a big conversation in the Enneagram community. Do you talk about a number about how they're perceived, or do you talk about a number about what's happening inside of them? Probably the answer is both, right? So I'm not saying that like 8s aren't standoffish. I guess I'm just trying to say they don't feel... Maybe they don't feel like, you know what I mean? They're not thinking about that. That doesn't mean that they aren't being standoffish. I guess when I hear shadow side, I just hear like the negative parts.
Right.
Maybe that's not really what you mean when you use shadow side.
We talked quite a bit, and that's a good place to wrap, I think, about, look, I'm not trying to control you, but don't try and control me. That is motive, or that's at least the inner life. But that posture can get expressed in very vibrant ways and in very self-protective ways. Yeah. Behavior-wise, it comes across different. I suppose that's what I'm trying to highlight, is that I think because she's talking about working together. And so putting forth there is a lot of behavior in the book. And then given this behavior, this is where the motive's coming from. Yeah. What I suppose, trying to point out is that's not always the behavior of 8s. And a lot of times you can see like some behavior of 8s is much more, look, this is my space. You don't need to be here. There's a lot of 8s that don't feel like they need to go higher, faster, louder in a corporate environment. They just want their office and to do their job and knock out, what they're tasked with.
You think 8s don't always want to go higher, faster? At least not compared to other people, because 8s are not comparing themselves to other people. But you think there are some 8s who aren't always wanting to do more?
Some 8s look at their job as a job.
Okay, sure. But in other parts of their life.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying is it may be the case that higher, faster, louder gets relegated to your hobby.
I understand. You're saying this is like, she's saying this is how 8s show up at work, and you're saying sometimes some 8s show up like that in other places and don't show up like that at work. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Sure.
Sometimes 8s just show up because they need the paycheck because they don't care about the job.
The title of this chapter is I didn't come to work to make friends. And so I think that fits into that, at least. Maybe not how she talks about 8s in the rest of the chapter everywhere, but I mean, into that for sure. I come here and I do my job and I leave. Bye.
I think this is spot on in saying, again, I just want to say, I think 2s, 5s, and 8s are the most misunderstood of the numbers, and she thinks 8s are the most misunderstood of the numbers. It would go along these sides that I think there's just more of there's a kaleidoscopic presentation of 8s sometimes. And sometimes we don't see the 8s who are quieter. Yeah. I really thought that we were going to get through 8s, 3s, and 1s. Idealist that I am. And shocker, we haven't even started talking about ourselves, Katie. This is a problem.
Took too long because we started talking about ourselves in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. We had read all of these great insights about 3s and 1s and gave us permission. Well, next time we'll pick up with 3s and 1s and finish off the doing processors. I like this. I like that we're spending a little bit more time on this idea and not just flying through it and kind of getting our teeth into something meaty.
Agreed.
Bang. Well, if you want to connect with us, you can go to aroundthecircle.org. Lots of fun stuff that we're doing. Lots of ways to connect with us through workshops, through book studies that we're doing. We have over 100 hours of content in videos and other podcasts. Well worth just going over there, getting a free membership, or signing up for a trial membership and clicking around, finding what we have. One of the things that doesn't often get said, I don't know if you actually do this. Tell me if you do this. You are able to set up all of our videos that we release at Around the Circle can go to your podcast feed. Do you do that?
Really? No.
It's a thing.
Cool.
There's a setting. You just go to the feed and you click that you want this sent to your podcast.
So you go to Patreon.
It'll show you how to do it.
And there's a button that you click and it says send this to like Spotify or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. And then you can follow the steps. Cool. No, I do not.
It does it to both podcasts and Spotify. I never watch our videos. I always listen. I re-listen to Rewired to make sure I didn't screw anything up it just goes to Apple, my iTunes account. So anyway, lots of good stuff there, and it's worth naming. It makes it very, very easy. They have good software.
Cool.
And that's what I got. You got anything else?
No. Come back for 3 and 1.
There you go. All right, you're the best.
You are.
Somebody told me that if you look closely, you can see the color of another